We are back, folks. Welcome back. Weekly webinar. Dr. Mike, Dr. James. Dr. Mike's looking very Sith Lordy today. Hope you guys appreciate him. Mike, how's it going?
I'll just answer with the only relevant thing to say. Dark side.
Rebel scum.
It seems that it takes him so much emotional energy to say the dark side, like to say that phrase, that like, you know, motherfucker, like if I was Anakin and shit and this motherfucker was recruiting me, he'd be like, join us. I'd be like, you don't look so good, dude. Like, I don't know if, you know, Obi-Wan, yeah, he's annoying. His skin looks clear. His eyes are open. It just it's like the bodybuilder tries to talk you into doing like 5 grams of tren. You're like, I don't think I want any part. You don't look like you're going to live too much longer. So maybe not the dark side is all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and he's like he's in every fucking movie and he just lives for eternity. Like, get out of here! I'm sick of your ass, Palpatine.
Lives and he's barely alive. He's like,
right, like you've been the same actor for like forever. You couldn't even get a new actor. He's been old this whole time. Jesus
he literally
Christ.
has been old for 2 generations straight. God, how the fuck is that possible?
It is kind of sweet, but also
it's like weird. Jack LaLanne was old in like the 1920s.
He outlived all of us dumbasses.
Oh, yeah.
For sure. All right. Well, instead of fuckery, why don't we get on with the show here? Got Gorilla Bow Light, an original. Gorilla Bow Travel.
I like the travel one is actually really big.
Yeah. But what am I gonna take that with me somewhere?
Like, I feel like the light wins the travel one too, but who knows what travel means, you know?
I feel like that's something like if you put, like an Australian would give you endless shit about, like, yeah, nah, man, what's that gorilla bow all about? You going to shoot something with it? Yeah, nah.
Everyone in America's got like a bow, don't they? Like, no, everyone in Australia is not Crocodile Dundee, goddammit. All right, you ready, James?
I'm ready.
Travis S. Travis S.
Excuse me. Got it.
All right. For physique athletes, is there any practical substance to exercises for quote-unquote lower or quote-unquote upper abs? My understanding of the literature is that all the exercises stimulate the rectus abdominis equally. But from personal experience, certain exercises tick all the adequate stimulus boxes for separate parts of the abs. For example, flutter kicks will supply tension, burn, disruption, and soreness to my lower abs, but tabletop crunches will do it in the upper abs. Despite what research says, could you, over time, select exercises actually do bias certain parts of the rectus abdominis? This is completely irrelevant. I'm just a pussy who needs to train harder. That may be true no matter what we conclude here about the abs. Preferential activation of various parts of muscles has been well illustrated for 10 years now. Just look up Brad Schoenfeld's summary of that research. It's absolutely possible to train or activate some parts of the muscle and more than others, as there's been demonstrated actually not just activate but grows, called regional hypertrophy. Let's look it up. So if you really do feel tension, burn, pump, disruption, etc., in your lower abs and more than upper with an exercise, the good money says is that it's being activated more. It's absolutely a thing. While the best ab exercises are the ones that just overall stimulate the most, like, for example, the ab wheel rollout. I mean, that's just like fuck you up. But if you have exercises that target the lower abs, totally. Just like one quick thing, don't expect lower ab hypertrophy to cause a lower ab cool look unless you're planning on having bigger abs and or are very lean, probably both. So it doesn't remember spot reduction is still not a thing.
Yeah. And just keep in mind, although regional hypertrophy can and does happen, it's also an easy excuse for fuckery. What I've found is that people will be like, oh, I'm going to try. Like Arnold did a lot of fuckery in his book about like, oh, train the biceps, this part for the biceps for the peak and this part. It's like, some of that is true. You don't know any of that. Right. But like a lot of it is just like, okay, if you pick an exercise, you're going to, if it hits a large portion of the muscle, it's going to, hit a lot of all of the muscle, but it might target some parts of it regionally. But I find that like a lot of people will use that idea as an excuse to do dumb shit and be like, but I feel it here. Well, it's like, it's still dumb. Like, come on. Yeah. I can hit myself with a hammer and I'll feel it,
For sure. Don't ever trade off gnarly, full on raw stimulus magnitude or SFR. Like people are like, Mike, do you ever do like the fucking, what do you do for your vastus lateralis? I'm like, not shit, man. I do deep knee bends, deep squats, leg presses, hack squats. My quads grow all over. And if I did some weird shit with my feet turned out, would I feel it a little bit more in one part? Sure. But I feel it so much less in the others. It's kind of like, like if you're really hungry for a big meal and someone's like, here's this really gingery flavored cookie, but it's half a cookie. You're like, I can appreciate some ginger. Get that out of my fucking face. Give me a real meal of just Captain Crunch. I know it's not gingery, but I can eat a whole box. Like at some point, if you're hungry, you know what I'm saying, you need a lot. Don't trade off too much quantity for quote unquote quality.
I feel like there's going to be a lot of those type of analogies going on today.
Help. Look at my face.
Captain Crunch. Somebody's thinking about Captain Crunch.
Jared Feather right now is at Nationals. I'll be joining him in a day, actually, to just bum around and watch him turn pro or whatever, hopefully. He says he's so lean and dry that he's had trouble smiling because it hurts his cheeks as his skin rubs against his cheeks. I was like, huh. I was doing cardio earlier today, and I almost did cardio to failure. I walked really far away from the gym, and then I was walking back, and I was like, I'm having trouble walking. Am I going to have to sit down and call an Uber? It was really intense. I was like, all right, at least I know I'm pushing it.
Walking to failure is definitely a life milestone. It's a very good accomplishment. I saw Jared's chest picture on Instagram the other day. I was like, God damn.
What the hell going on in here?
Yeah.
All right. Next up, John M.
Very vanilla name, John M.
Very. John M. is a really, really good question. How confident are you that metabolite training, like the metabolite meso and the MPT template, contribute significantly to muscle gain compared to just running the hypertrophy meso? Again, I figured that the expected value of gains from metabolite meso minus gains from hypertrophy meso under your current posterior belief isn't very large. It might make sense to skip it for a trainee who isn't a big fan of that type of training. I asked him, since I have an impression the metabolite stuff is more of we have reasons to believe that this might contribute. It probably doesn't hurt, so why not do it? Then it definitely helps you, and there's no real consensus. AFIAC, I believe stands for, as far as I know. I think you're mostly right on. I will say that the metabolite, the whole meso is, you don't have to do a whole meso of it. You can sprinkle it in whatever you want. But a mesocycle of more metabolite work and less other stuff, and thus consequently lighter work, has some advantages that I think are worth a mention. So you said someone's not a big fan of that type of training. Thing is, your joints are going to be big fans of that kind of training. And the release of monotony from conventional training is going to be a big fan of that kind of training. So it's like saying, do I have to do active rest? I'm not a big fan of it. I just want to keep training. Yeah, you can keep training if you feel fine and just deload. But active rest has these underlying benefits that don't express themselves in the act of doing it. It's a compounding thing that occurs later. So do you have to do metabolite training? No. Can you just do conventional rep ranges? Absolutely. But is a metabolite meso every now and again going to give you definitely robust hypertrophy? Yes. Is it going to de-stress your joints? Yes. Is it going to be a variation that, even though that you might not like it, it really primes you and pumps you psychologically for regular hardcore training for months after? Totally. And because it's two things, effective and primes you for later training to be more effective psychologically by not being monotonous, it's like a win-win. So maybe you don't have to do metabolite phase every block, but every other block or something, throw it in maybe for 3 or 4 weeks. Could be a really good change of pace that checks every single box and is a net benefit because it spares your joints and really trumps you up. It's kind of like, here's another food analogy, James. It's like, if you are always going out to eat at your favorite restaurants every weekend, skipping a weekend or two and just eating at home, it's not as fun, but it can really make you appreciate the fuck out of some tasty restaurant food later, just make things better overall. Because you guys ever been in a situation where you're going out to eat so much that someone's like, what do you want cheat meal tonight? You're like, nothing. I don't give a shit anymore. I've had all the pizza and the ice cream. It's just not doing, what it's supposed to. But if you have some meals at home and it's not so fun, it still checks all the boxes of getting you fed and making sure you're alive and nutrition coming in. But then at a couple weekends later, you're like, ooh, that new Thai place, as opposed to being like, I'm over the whole eating thing. So something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one last thing, it fits very nice. The metabolite phase fits very nicely into a phase potentiated model for hypertrophy training, where you might start to experience some staleness from doing kind of the meat and potatoes training, and it gives that little bit of variation stimulus. And when you're going on through, if you're assuming you're doing some kind of paired dieting, whether it's massing or cutting, typically as you get further and further along, you start to have more fatigue relating effects, which can inhibit your ability to lift heavy in some different ways. So especially on a cut diet, it's more profound. So it just kind of fits in and checks a lot of boxes in a phase potentiated model, in a longitudinal model for hypertrophy training. Acutely, like you said, you could probably do either one and it's not a huge deal. But when you're actually looking at training in sequences over the course of meso to mesos or blocks to blocks, having that in there does seem to check a lot of boxes. Do you have to do it? No. Is it probably a good idea? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Very well said. At some point you get to a place where like, I can do another meso, but it can't be conventional heavy training. And then you're like, oh, metabolite exists, versus just being like, oh, it's time for active rest. It's like, yeah, but maybe it's not.
And the thing is, like, most of us have been there where you get to a point where, especially if you're dieting, you're like, I just can't do sets of 8 anymore. Like, it's killing me. It's literally.
But I have 4 weeks left of dieting and I can't just do active rest.
I can do a set of 15 and then maybe like a metabolite cable curl. Like, I can do that. Mm-hmm. And you can probably reap some benefit from it.
Yep. Next up, Inti Castro.
What? We speak American over here, boy. What you talking about?
Fuck, I swear to God. INTI space.
Got it.
There it is. Great question. James, I want you to tee off on this after I say my 2 cents. Fatigue and cognitive function. How much would the accumulated fatigue over meso affect school performance? Performance, maybe none. Capability of maximum performance, significant. Creativity, flexibility of thought, novel ideas, and rapid computation that has to be more accurate than not, significant. I deal with this all the time because my main job is to be intellectually productive. But then like week 4 from meso, I like stare at the computer and I'm like, what the fuck are ideas? And then I drop my fatigue and I'm like, I wake up in the middle of the night and write shit down. I'm like, oh my fucking God, I know everything. So it's definitely significant. James, do you have any experience and insight in this?
I do, because of some of the research I was doing recently on the volume landmarks for skills and tactics stuff. A lot of it dips into the learning area. And so I had to learn a lot about learning, which is kind of funny to say. But it turns out that things like memory consolidation and recall are heavily influenced by fatigue state. So you actually do have I got to think of a better way to state this, in that, because you can't do it in sports science terms, because it's the wrong field, right? But you could phrase it in the sense of like, you have to have a state of preparedness mentally to be able to learn, consolidate, refine thoughts and ideas, right? And if you're too fatigued, you're going to have a really hard time doing that. And one thing that is kind of interesting, and it's related to learning and fatigue, is that in many cases, if you're trying to learn something new and you miss out on your sleep opportunity, maybe you just didn't get enough sleep, or you had a rough night, just didn't sleep the way you wanted to, it's actually, in many cases, kind of an all or nothing effect, where you had an opportunity to consolidate some of the information that was going on throughout the day. You missed your sleep opportunity, and that's one of the big regulators of things like memory consolidation. And if you miss it, you just kind of have to start over and try again. So literally, like, whatever information that you took in that day, it's not to say it's like you didn't get any of it, but you did not get a significant portion of it that you probably would have otherwise have gotten. And so we see a lot of really interesting fatigue interactions with things like your ability to recall things and some of the things that Mike already mentioned, but even just learning and refining the knowledge that you have heavily influenced. And so there's definitely a case to be made that you have to have a state of preparedness. I hate that word phrasing, but it's the idea is there to be able to learn effectively. So yeah, absolutely is going to interfere at some point.
Henrik Anderson.
Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Anderson.
And
I noticed that my lips don't move nearly as much as they should when I talk.
Got him.
All right. He's got 3 questions. We usually just say we're going to answer one, but we'll see. Number 1. Henrik, we're going to go to 2 and 3. So number
Mike
1,
Mike didn't like that one.
I'll tell you. Well, here's why. Within the next 3 weeks, based on our content release schedule, and this video was recorded like 3 months ago, we have a fucking comprehensive pre-exhaust video coming out on RP. Like, it's just going to answer every fucking question you have on it. So I'm going to punt to that. Sorry, but it's coming and it's going to be amazing. And if we take time to answer this, it's going to be like because there's lots of nuance to answer it well, because there's times when pre-exhaust is actually a bad idea, times when it's fine, and times when it's great. So I'll punt on that. But let's get to number 2 here. When cutting down for the summer and staying lean for 2 to 3 months, to get the ladies, get ladies, you can tell yourself that's what you're interested in. Is there anything I should know or do with training nutrition when trying to build as much muscle mass while staying lean? Training volumes and so on. James, you're pissed. I'll give you the floor.
Yeah, so Henrik, so you kind of have
Don't do it. Just kidding.
2 conflicting ideas, right? So cutting down for the summer and staying lean is one thing, right? And then trying to build as much muscle mass while staying lean is a completely different thing, right? So I'm not sure if you're kind of using those 2 things in the same idea, or if we're excluding them. They should be excluded, right? So the first one is really simple, right? You cut down for the summer. You're going to take a modest calorie deficit for 2 to 3 months, say like somewhere between 0.5, maybe 1% body weight per week, somewhere in the middle there. And do your normal training stuff. Train hard. MEV to MRV type training, no big deal. When trying to build as much muscle while staying lean, it's largely the same song and dance, kind of in the opposite direction. However, I kind of feel, Mike, you chime in here and let me know if I'm on point. More often than not, when people ask this question, they are really asking, like, how do I gain muscle without gaining fat? That's the root
inefficiently.
Of the question. Yeah, and that's the idea, is inefficiently. So it's kind of like if you take a moderate weight gain rate, let's say about 0.5% body weight per week, you will stay relatively lean as you gain muscle mass. Are you leaving maybe a teeny tiny bit of gains on the table from not gaining more weight? Maybe, sure, okay. But you're also not accumulating as much fat, which allows you to mass for a longer period of time. And in the long term, end up gaining more muscle longitudinally rather than just the acute short-term picture.
So if you insist on gaining through that time, as opposed to just maintaining, that's fine. James gave the first part of a very good answer, which is just gain on the low end. I would say 0.25% per week. So that means if you weigh 200 pounds, only shoot for like half a pound per week of gain, which means like 12 weeks later, you only weigh 6 more pounds. Like, you're not the world's fattest man at the end of that, right? So first get lean, then through the 12 weeks of summer, literally only gain like 5 to 7 pounds. And then you'll be fucking pretty lean the whole time. I mean, literally. Is it costing you potential muscle gains? Maybe. But the second part is, how do you go about actually doing that? So here's one fact that will occur when you're busy trying to get the ladies. You're going to be doing ice cream and barbecues and fun things, which means weekends and sometimes even weekdays. There's going to be some eating, which does not comport with that 0.25. So my best advice to you is, when you are not having fun and cheating, because look, don't not cheat. The summer, especially when you're young, trying to get laid, I mean, like, fucking love of God, just eat some bullshit. Have fun. Your youth only happens once. That being said, on the days in which you're not going out and eating, don't jam the food. Take like a small deficit or just maintenance. Eat higher protein, lower carb, lower fat, high volume, low density food, tons of really good stuff, veggies, greens, shit like that, fruits. And then what is going to end up happening is most of your gain will come from the cheat stuff, as far as surplus weekly, so that you can cheat and still not get super fat. The way to get fat is to have mostly every day be a small surplus, and then cheat on top of that on the weekends. Say goodbye to that 6 pounds, that turns into 18 pounds or some shit, and then you get super fat. So just really watch yourself when you're not partying, and then when you're partying, have fun. That's probably my best advice.
Yeah, staying active always helps too.
Yeah. All right, number 2, I think, is good enough for Heinrich.
Yeah, Heinrich, get out of here.
Folks, one question at a time if you for sure want them answered. Patrick Norrie. Norrie?
Norrie? Patrick Norrie, got it.
Question for James.
Oh my.
During the connective tissue question from last week, you mentioned about how ever since you moved, you are effectively doing almost strongman style activities on a daily basis.
Yeah, it's fucking me up.
From when you moved up until now, has that impacted your overall fitness, muscular, cardio, recovery state? Where have you seen improvements and detriments, and how do you usually adjust and adapt to that around your training sessions to still get the most out of what your goals are?
Yeah, so like I haven't necessarily figured it out yet. I'm still kind of a work in progress. So the one issue that I've definitely been dealing with is my right forearm extensor muscle. Strangely enough, I don't know if it's like a
You've just
reciprocal.
been jacking off too much,
Dude, I
Brad.
don't know if it's like an inhibition thing or if it's like what, but there's something about the shit that I'm doing, whether it's the carrying the logs, chopping stuff, gardening, caulking some of these checks in the logs. Like my
Cocking.
fucking forearm kills me to the point now where it's starting to radiate down to wrist pain. So I had to change some of my exercises out, which were exacerbating it, and that seemed to help a little bit. It's still kind of bugging me. I haven't done as much cardio because I end up just my NEAT is so high.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. If now the thing is, like, I have noticed that, like, when I have gone hiking and stuff, I have noticed that my cardio has gone down a little bit. But that's because I was doing so much cardio training before. And this is what we've got. Mike and I have talked about this in a couple webinars where people say, like, how much cardio do I need to be healthy or versus how much do I need for cardio training? Like, I get plenty of cardio from my NEAT activities to be healthy, but because I'm not training for cardio specifically anymore, I've actually experienced a pretty significant drop in my cardio when I do activities like hiking. And so that's something I want to kind of remedy a little bit because I do enjoy those things, and I want to make sure it's not totally painful. It's all, another thing too is we're at a little higher altitude out here. I think we're like 3,500 ish.
Wow, that's really high up.
Yeah, it's not crazy. It's not like if you're in like Colorado or something, it's definitely higher. But for me, I'm very sensitive to the altitude, so like I start feeling that wear and tear pretty quickly. So one of the things you just got to think about is kind of the systemic fatigue factor of whatever it is that you're doing. So if you're not used to chopping logs, stacking them, carrying them, and doing all that shit, it's not the hardest thing in the world, but it is tiring, right? Because it's heavy, and it's basically like doing, farmers walks and, tire smashes and all that same shit you see in like CrossFit and strongman gyms. So it's exhausting. You very likely will have to adjust some of the training on things like your arm training, shoulder training, and maybe even you have to. For me, I've had to choose less systemically exhausting exercises for my legs in particular.
That's a big one, man.
Yeah. So like I'll do like a close stance pause squats is kind of one of my staples now. I've actually been doing a lot of sissy squats as like my second quad movement in the week. And I have shitty quads. So that's actually a good movement for me. If somebody like Mike is too strong for that kind of movement without really having to weigh like a 200-pound vest or something. But for me, I have such long legs and I'm not very strong in the quads. It's actually okay. So yeah, there's just a lot of weird little changes. It's one of those things where it's like clearly a trade-off, but it's a trade-off for the lifestyle that I like to live. So it's worth it to me. Could I be like more jacked and by not doing that shit? Absolutely. But I don't really care.
Why would you be more jacked if you're choosing not to live like a lumberjack? The entire point of being jacked is so you can look like a lumberjack. Be a lumberjack.
Exactly. That was my long-term periodization, right? I've done all that work so I could be a lumberjack now and live that life.
100%. Patrick Rodowicz. Another Patrick.
Yeah,
this is like
same search box.
James. This is like fucking IRA convention.
Oh no.
Patrick O'Shaughnessy.
O'Shaughnessy.
This is Ireland. If I was like immortal, essentially like Vegeta, like unharmed by human weapons, one of the many places I would go is like an IRA meetup because I just want to hear people with thick Irish accents talk about like liberty from the British Empire and just like, yes, say that shit. And I know that's mostly a Scottish accent. You know what I'm saying? But that's further my point. I need more practice with the Irish accent. How fuck am I supposed to do that if I'm not going to secret Dublin IRA meetings?
I would show up to the IRA meeting like, is this where you get the S&P index funds or is this something else? Oh, it's a different IRA. Fuck. Shit.
Fucking idiot. They'd suspect that you were a spy. And you're like, no, honestly, guys, I'm just here for the accents. This is amazing. They shoot you. Nothing happens. They're like, what the fuck? You're like, again, I'm not here to make trouble. I could kill all of you. I'm immortal. I just want to just keep going with the meeting. I promise I'm not going to tell. I just love it. Just do you. Pretend I'm not here.
Ignore me. The Irish is a tough one to imitate. And my family's Irish. I have people, my family lives in Ireland. And even for me, it's hard to quite get it right. Whereas like other ones like Scottish is easy. For me, it's easier to like make jokes with. Irish, I can't quite get it.
The British Isles fascinate me. The Commonwealth in general, the British Commonwealth, like New Zealand, Australia, Canada, the UK, I would have to say is my favorite place on earth. I just love it.
It covers a lot of area.
It does. And amazing accents, except for the Canadian accent, which really isn't an accent at all. They just happen to make up for it by being model human beings. But almost like too good. It's like, shut up, you Canadian asshole. You think you're better than me. You accurately think you're better than me. And but you're not judging me. Which I would, at least if you were judging me, I could hate you. Like the French are better than a lot of people, but they know it. But the French Canadians are like, oh, it's okay. And you're like, no, it's not okay. Don't be so good. God damn it.
Yeah. Canada's not too far from where I live.
That's great.
We're up there.
What the fuck is Patrick saying? Oh, yeah, Patrick Rodowick. Great question. Question about scientific methods. Does telling subject that something is a placebo effect make that effect smaller in subsequent measurements? In other words, does an awareness of a method's placebo-ness make it less effective? For example, if I have teammates that think a given recovery method is awesome and I suspect it is basically a non-factor, should I bother to disabuse them of their belief in the method?
Oh, two different questions. But
two different questions. James will take the second. I'll take the first. Absolutely, telling subjects the placebo effect is a placebo gets rid of probably the entire or most of the placebo effect. You got to be some weird, to quote Riddick, what kind of desperate dick takes the job? like if someone's like, this doesn't work, okay? You're like, great, it'll help. Okay. So no, the placebo effect is almost entirely washed away if you tell people it's a placebo. So that's why placebo-controlled studies technically, but would ethically lie to people. Like they have to. And otherwise, you have to believe that either you don't know which one the placebo is, or you think both things work where one of them doesn't really work. So absolutely, yes, the answer to your first question. James, should he disabuse his fellow teammates of their beliefs?
I actually want to go back to the first question because there are many documented instances, and what Mike said on the whole is very true, but there are instances where you tell someone that what they're experiencing is a placebo effect and it goes on and keeps working. Now that's like a non-statistical portion of most of these groups, but it does happen, which is really funny. And
those are the desperate dicks I was talking about.
Yeah. And that's when I think people, when you're kind of looking at it more ideologically than objectively, where you're just like, I believe in my heart that
I want this to work. God damn it.
Exactly. So for the second question, there's kind of two different trains of thoughts here. So you can sit in like the ivory science tower and look down on people for doing things that don't work or are stupid. And you can tell them so much. And unfortunately, what that does is, what I have found, more harm than good in many cases. So you might liberate them from doing dumb shit with their free time, but you also might irreparably harm your relationship with that athlete. So typically in these instances, you kind of evaluate what it is that they're doing and seeing like what is the cost effectiveness or what is like the potential harm that they're doing by doing it. And if you find that the harm is relatively high or that like the opportunity cost is relatively high, then it's worth having a sit down and just saying like, hey, look, I know you really enjoy this, but this is really becoming a problem in that it's interfering with things that you could be doing that could be helping you a lot.
Or they're spending a lot of money on it. And they're like not that rich,
On the other hand, if it's something somewhat innocuous or not really taking up much time, effort, resources, sometimes it's good just to let them just keep doing it. And then if they want to come around and ask you about it at a later time, then that's fine. And then you can have a truthful conversation. But what I think most people just need to be aware of is that if you go around telling people that what they're doing, something that they believe is working for them, and they honestly in their heart think that it's making them better, and you go around and say, well, I know that that's dumb and you should stop doing it, more likely you're just going to ruin that relationship with that athlete or with your trainer or whomever that is. Whereas if you just say like, hey, I think maybe there's some other things that we can do, or if you just give them some information and say, look, I really don't think this is the best thing, but if you really like it, just keep doing it. It's fine. And if you ever want to talk to me about it again, that's fine. For me, if it's, like I said, if I think it's dumb, like let's just say, here's classic example, person gets a 1 hour massage once per week. What is the cost, opportunity cost, fatigue cost, all the costs of getting a massage? Minimal, right? Like they spent $60? It's an hour once a week. And if anything, it actually promotes the activities that I would otherwise be recommending that they do, right? Like relaxing, stepping away from their cell phone, having a therapist to some degree. Those are all positive things. So if it's something like that, I would just say, like, just keep doing it. And if you ever want to ask me about massage, that's great. We can talk about it. If it's something like they're doing 2 hours of pool sessions every other day,
4 times a week or some shit.
That's when it's like, okay, this is actually eating up a significant amount of training and or recovery time, and it's just not
spending $50 a week on like some kind of herbs or some shit. And you're just like,
So the kind of the TLDR version is like, weigh the pros and cons of whatever it is that they're doing. If it's a huge con and it's worth bringing up, bring it up to them and let them know that it's maybe not worth their time and there are other things that they could do. If it's relatively low, just let them keep doing it. And if they want to ask you about it later, that's fine.
Boom. Next up, the man with a mythical YouTube name, Mike.
Oh, the Mike.
I suppose he was like the fifth user to sign up for YouTube.
Yeah.
All right. In the boxing/MMA world, it is common to hear that you can't develop one-punch knockout power, as it's something you were born with. How true is that? Doesn't getting stronger increase power? So let me tell you a couple quick things before James annihilates this further. The boxing and MMA world is filled with some of the stupidest fucking people you'll never have the displeasure of meeting, thank God. Don't meet them because they're dumber in real life than they are on TV, and they're pretty dumb on TV. A lot of times what passes as wisdom is just a collection of retarded things perpetuated by sequentially retarded people to one another. So I wouldn't take too much stock into that. So just huge grain of salt. But there is a grain of truth there where someone's end limb velocity generation, which depends on a couple of factors, a few neural ones, fiber type, and a lot of it is actually limb length and limb ratio. End limb velocity, the higher it is that you can generate, the more knockout power you have. In addition to that, the actual physical weight of especially the end of your limb, the physical weight and size of your fist, plus the velocity at which you throw it, is a big factor. And there's also another big part of knockout power, which is the degree to which your fist does not slow down when it hits somebody in the face. The less it slows down, the more force transfer occurs, the more likely knockout is. Because tiny, weak people can really put some nasty end limb velocity on it. But the actual impulse they transmit, the amount of force times time they transmit into the jaw is really small. As soon as they hit something, it goes like that, right? Which is why, like, if you see a 110-pound boxer with unreal hand speed, you can probably just reach out your face to him and have him hit you a couple times and then just do that and then crush him or whatever. So that being said, those are all very heavily genetically influenced things. However, the degree to which you slow down upon contact heavily depends on muscular size and strength, which is incredibly alterable. Your end limb velocity is not nearly as alterable, but still alterable. Because of those two things that multiply into each other, especially the fact that your fist slows down a lot less if you're really strong. If you become much stronger, and if you gain body weight and put more of your body into a punch, and you're now much heavier, your ability to alter your knockout power is huge. And here is the case in point of why that's true. Name me a single heavyweight without knockout power. They don't exist because they're all fucking giant and strong. It's not that heavyweights just happen to have these magic genetics for knockout power, whereas almost 90% of all tiny lightweights don't. I have not a doubt in my mind that if Mighty Mouse was scaled up to a heavyweight, he would knock every motherfucker out, left and right. It's not that he doesn't have knockout genetics. He fucking weighs 120 pounds. That's a fixable problem, right? So if you're like Nate Diaz and you're like 6'2" or whatever and you're 170, if he gained to 230 by training with weights, he'd be knocking motherfuckers out like crazy. But whereas now most people can take a couple Nate Diaz hits to the face and not really bat an eye. Not most people, most elite fighters with really good chins. But so it is absolutely alterable, but it is definitely hugely genetic as well. So yeah, you can develop one punch knockout power. Maybe not develop it, but highly increase it. But that's not to say that especially if you're constrained to a weight class, if you're in the 120-pound weight class and you really just have no knockout power, there's a limited amount of things we can do with you, keeping you in that weight class that'll make you, there's nothing we can do that's going to make you a knockout artist, for sure. We can enhance your punching power significantly, but a lot of that comes with increase in strength and increase in mass. So if you go up to a 150, oh yeah, we can make a big difference. But a lot of times within the weight class, there's only so much you can do. James?
Yeah, that was really good. And this is where my sports science degree has made me some money on a lot of my betting odds, because this is something that's statistically is a phenomenon.
Is that ethical?
Of course, right? So for a lot of the same things that you said, like what is the probability of like a women's strawweight competitor getting a knockout in the first?
Who bets on that shit? Like, yeah, knockout. Like, what are you, nuts?
Or even a finish, right? So like these are things you can actually, look at and see statistically, and look at populations. Like you can, UFC fight stats is like a thing you can just go look up and download and just play around with the data. I've done it a ton of times, and it's how I make a lot of my bets, because you can just look at some of these things. But yeah, so Mike answered it really well. I think he spoke mostly on the fitness side of things, right? Like, can you get stronger? Can you train to be more explosive? Like, sure. A lot of that is kind of your genetic gift, your gift from your parents or from Mother Nature, but it is trainable to some degree. I think another thing with the knockout power and just punching in general, for kickboxing, MMA, those types of sports, there's a huge skill and tactical component in there as well, right? So not only is your, just intrinsic physical ability to wing that arm out there important in terms of like connecting with somebody, but where you actually are able to place the shot makes a huge difference, right? So you can punch somebody in the nose all day long and they're not going to get knocked out, right? But you hit that sweet spot right on the chin, and bing. Man, did you see the Contender Series this week?
I didn't, unfortunately.
There was a fucking sick knockout, and it was just the guy threw one. He basically just like feigned left a little bit. The guy bit on the feint and just went straight down. Boom! First punch he threw, knocked the guy just out. Fucking.
Well,
cold.
that's like the two ways to get to knockout power that are not mutually exclusive, but the two illustrations is Francis Ngannou versus Conor McGregor. Like, Ngannou is not known to be a technical guy. He's just fucking enormous and super fast twitch and strong. He just glances at you and you fucking blow up. Conor McGregor's not very strong, not so explosive, but he can put it where he wants it. So, yeah, that's both play into that ability.
Yeah, so there's that skill component as well, right? And then there's also the tactics component. Like, it's easy to like get really good at punching a heavy bag, but it's not easy to hit someone else who's trying to hit you back. So I think those things are very, very much at play, and a lot of people tend to dismiss those things. But like, go ahead, if you can get your bench up to 500 pounds, you might think you have knockout power. Go ahead and try and knock someone out who doesn't want to be knocked out. See what happens. More likely, you're going to hit them on the arm or the head and not knock them out, or you might even just miss altogether. A couple other things to think about in terms of skills and tactics, especially in a sport like MMA, most of the punches being thrown, except for when people really start sitting down and throwing their hips into their punches, most of them are thrown submaximally. Why is that? Well, if you are just trying to throw your arm out there as hard as you can and try and push as far as it will go, what happens? It actually throws you off balance, especially if you miss, right? So what most people will do
and you probably will.
Right. And so what most people will do is throw kind of sub-maximal level punches. Now, sometimes you'll see people really sit down on it and throw their whole body into it, right? But more often than not, they're throwing sub-max so that they can get the arm out and then recover their guard relatively quickly. Because if you just throw the punch out there, now you're completely vulnerable on that side, right, for another punch. And everyone who's been punched before knows that because they've done that.
Yeah.
So,
and if they shake the guy, they can sit down into the next few punches.
So the idea being like the more consistent, the higher level of consistency that you have in terms of the power output you can put out. So you basically, right, I'm just making numbers up. Don't quote me. Please don't quote me. Don't say James said this number. Don't. It's just a thought experiment. But let's just say in terms of your max punching power, on average, you're throwing out about 70%, right? And so you can measure that in terms of like if it's an impulse measurement or a wattage or whatever. The idea being you can train so that average 70%, maybe you can get it up to like 75%, or maybe you stay at 70%, but now the force or the power measurement at 70% has gone up significantly, and you can keep reproducing that same punch over and over and over again with the pace that you want. Pair that with good skill development and actually good tactics. That's what's really going to generate the knockout power. So I think people spend too much time thinking about like, how much do I need to bench to be able to knock someone out? Like, motherfucker, you need to train fighting if you want to be able to knock someone out, because they're not just going to let you punch them, especially if you're somebody who looks like they can bench 500 pounds. They're probably going to run away.
Yeah, so, fuck that.
I think people put too much stock into the fitness side of things and not into the skills and tactics side of things. What was that? What did Mike Tyson say? Everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth, right? Like, I think that plays a bigger role, because at the end of the day, and like Mike, I'd be curious to hear your take on this. I think the training for the fitness portion of a lot of this stuff is relatively easy. It's pretty straightforward. Now, we obviously went to school.
Even though a lot of guys don't do it, yeah.
Right. So like it's I don't want to undermine our own education here, but to me that's kind of like straightforward and not complicated. Whereas the other part of like, how can I get my hand to consistently land where I want it to land on someone who doesn't want it to land there? That's like where the real knockout power comes from.
100%. I love that quote of everyone has a plan until you get punched in the mouth. And like you fight Habib for a round, you come back to your corner like, coach, I punched him in the mouth a bunch. He still has a plan. Like, yeah. I know you're gonna lose, man.
Dude, Habib's gnarly.
His fight against Gaethje. I remember Gaethje went back to his corner, and his corner man's just like, what did he say? He's like, you got to slow down. And Gaethje was something to the effect of like, I'm not pushing the pace. He is. Like, he keeps coming at me, man. What am I supposed to do about that? Like,
that's a really sweet like demonstration too, and for me at least, of somebody with like of sport tactics where it's like, you know exactly what he's gonna do. He's done it to all of his opponents, right? Yeah. You have to be able to stop him, and it's like if he's that good at whatever thing that he's doing that you can't, like, game over.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because you know it's coming, right? You know he's not gonna throw a fucking spinning roundhouse kick and knock you out. You know he's just going to shove you on the cage, drag you down, step over, get that arm behind the back, and start punching you.
Yeah.
Or choke you out.
Yeah, crazy. Gerako Delta. Gerako.
Got it.
Kinobody.
Ah.
This is already off a crackling start. Kinobody says you should only do incline bench press and avoid flat decline and dips as they prevent you getting a square masculine chest that looks like a plate of armor, which he'd know nothing about, but whatever. Which women adore. Most women don't care about chests. This is like, he's selling you shit. Anyway, do you agree? Do those lifts give you a feminine round chest by activating the lower pecs to a high degree? There's a genetic, so a muscular lower chest doesn't look feminine. It looks fucking amazing. It looks like a full plate of armor instead of half a plate of armor. I actually happen to have a much better upper chest, which is incredibly rare, than lower chest. And I've actually received critiques that are accurate. They're like, your lower chest could actually be bigger. Because it's like my upper chest is huge and my lower chest is kind of like, eh. So fully developed pecs means fully developed pecs. Now, because most people don't do as much incline work as they do flat, and most people's lower pecs are bigger than their upper pecs, yes, Kinobody has a point that prioritizing more of your training to the upper pecs for most people is a good idea. But to do all of it and to do no lower chest training is for the birds, James.
Yeah. I don't blame you for asking those kind of questions. I just hate those kind of questions, and I'm sorry.
James, finish up. I'll be right back.
Yeah, so the reason why I don't like it is because it's just total nonsense, right? Like, what does a feminine round chest even mean? Like, does it mean like gives you breasts? Like, no. And like, show me someone who does dips and bench presses and steps on a stage that has like a feminine looking chest. It's just crazy. It's just like somebody who has not, like Mike said, he's just trying to sell you some shit that doesn't make any sense. And he's just trying to use like masculine and feminine as like provocative words to try and like get you to bite down on his idea, which has a lack of substance. So for me, like you can get plenty good upper, lower, mid, all of the above chest development from doing flat, mostly flat stuff. Is it probably a good idea, like Mike said, to bias some of yours towards incline work? Because most people tend to be a little bit more lacking in the incline. Yeah, sure. But does that mean you just abandon all the other ones altogether? No, I think that's like total nonsense. I didn't really know who Kinobody was until pretty recently. And Scott Hoon sent me a couple videos, and dude, that guy is, I'm sorry, but he is just vomitorium, just awful, just a slutacious hoe. Awful, awful, awful. So I would take anything that he says with a pretty good grain of salt, because it just seems like nonsense. I called Kinobody a slutacious hoe. That's basically excellent. Where I left off.
Yeah. Yes, most of the stuff he says has some grain of truth to it. It just likes to layer the bullshit on top of that.
And again, it's like it's an easy grab to use like provocative words like, this makes you look feminine. Like, oh, it makes me look feminine? Like, oh, like
no.
Yeah, it's easy when your argument has no substance. Like,
All right, next up, Mantas Pilipuitis.
oh, consistently
Very
delivers.
consistent. Mantas is the people's champ, always gets upvoted. He asks, how significant I got a slight English thing. How significant is getting hyped? How significant can it improve performance in various athletic activities? Does it mostly depend on the speed of the movement and the number of motor units involved in it? A few days ago, I consumed way more caffeine than usual. Set a huge PR on the broad jump. So yes, getting hyped does absolutely increase your explosive abilities more than something like endurance abilities, for which, if the endurance event is long enough, getting hyped can actually be a bad thing because then you blow your load early. But generally speaking, for events less than a minute in length for sure, and up to like 5, getting hyped works there, and it's very significant, but it's also incredibly fatiguing. So you want to be careful about getting hyped in training, because I think early part of training, early intermediates realize that if they get hyped, they can get way bigger PRs, and they start to get hyped in training all the time, and then they burn out. So got to be careful. It does improve performance, but it's something I would save more for competition than any other time, James.
Yeah, and so I think like getting hyped is really, really good for low skill, low tactic activities. The problem that you find is that when you have something, yeah, like powerlifting, right? Like when you have things that are high skill or high like reaction predictive, like your typical kind of sporting scenarios,
combat sport.
Yeah, it tends to be really bad because it actually takes you to a state of alertness that's too high for the activity in question, right? And so that can actually be a huge detriment when you're trying to do something that requires a lot of skill and or tactic. But for things that are purely physical and don't require a lot of, I don't want to say skill, but are low on the skill. Yeah, low on the skill totem pole. Getting really aroused can help a lot. I usually would not recommend using caffeine for that kind of, I like to take pre-workout and stuff like that, but it's going to be one of those things, like Mike said, that has a really severe fatigue cost. So now you're like artificially inflating how hyped you can get because you took a stimulant, right? So like the cost of that is going to be more than you realize and you won't know it until it's over. And that's the thing. So you might get really, really hyped and have like a great performance on 1 or 2 things. And then all of a sudden you're just completely wiped out and overreached on something. And that's what sucks. And it's bad enough when you just do it on your own, but then when you artificially enhance that with like a stimulant, think about like, okay, like could I have some great workouts if I took a whole bunch of meth? Like, yeah, I'd be hyped as fuck, but I'd also be wrecked afterwards, right? For a variety of reasons. Probably because the workout lasted like 3 days. I'm just kidding on that one, but yeah, it definitely works on some like low skill, like easy stuff. Like I would say jumping, like just from a stationary position, really easy. Barbell sports, minus weightlifting, but that kind of stuff. Yeah. For something else like sporting performance, probably not.
Yeah. Excellent answer. The last question for today. J space R.
Oh my God. JR. Son of a bitch. You guys are awesome. Thanks for doing what you do.
No.
What's the lowest
Save your
MRV?
cheap compliments. Yeah. Save your cheap compliments for another crew, JR. Just kidding. Thanks. All right. JR finishes us off with, what is the lowest MRV you've seen per major muscle group with your clients? I will see. James and I will have competition. I'll see what outlandish number we can say. I will say I've had a few people have a true hamstring MRV. This is the end of a mesocycle. I can't do more sets than this, and if I tried, I would get fucked up. Hamstring MRV of 4 hard working sets per week. 2 hip hinges, and then 2 leg curls, and they get DOMs like insanity, and it just never really gets more work capacity built, and they just can't do anymore. I remember RP Plus OG Daniel Jolly had a true hamstring MRV of like 6 or 8, And this is like, he was like, I'm trying to train hamstrings 3 times a week, but it doesn't work.
Oh, I remember
It has
that.
to be twice a week. And I can only do like 3 sets of leg curls and I can't do any more. Like, dang, you have the best problem possible. Like, I wish my quad MRV was 4 so I didn't have to fucking suffer as much. So I would say that, yeah, MRV of 4 for hamstrings. I've never seen an MRV lower than that.
I've had some like funny instances where I've had people basically overreach with no physical efforts, where you just like send them the program and they're like, I can't, I'm like too fucked up. You're like, did you even start it yet? And they're like, no. Like, we just looked at it and panicked. What happened? MRV, awesome. Like no physical efforts. That is a thing, strangely enough. But I'm trying to think of it. Like hamstrings is usually the first one that comes to mind for most people because it's so low. I have had people. Like what I find ends up happening is you start to see like overuse injuries at seemingly really low levels. For example, I have like one client who their biceps, like most people can handle some bicep volume, right? Like it's not the hardest muscle in the world. Mm-hmm. They won't hit like an MRV in a performance standpoint. So everything looks fine, but there's like somewhere around the like 20 sets mark, just start seeing like overuse injuries where this person I know could probably tolerate like 40 sets. Now you might say like, well, 20 is still really high. It's like, yeah, if you knew who this person was, then you'd understand they could probably do like 50 of everything and it'd be fine. So sometimes you see that kind of stuff where it seems artificially low and everything seems fine performance wise, but then they start like getting weird injuries and stuff like that. That's more often what I see is like not so much a performance, so much as just like they start getting hurt from stuff.
I have a similar one, and I think you and I have both experienced it too, is that asynchronicity of MRV with muscles you usually train as part of a group, and one really just fucks the other ones. Adductors for squatting and leg pressing.
I've done that,
like, yeah. I'm like, I could do so much more quad volume, but my adductors are like, nope, go fuck yourself. And then you have to do more isolation stuff, which is fine. It's a great way around it. But it's almost like someone's asked, like, why don't you just squat for all your volume? I'm like, because multiple parts of me would fall apart before my quads would.
I have done, so that's a really good low MRV because I've done this mistake and I haven't learned from it yet, which is really stupid, where if I take out high bar squats for a long time and I put them back into the mix, my adductors overreach on the first set. And I'm like, what is happening to my adductors? And you just forget like, oh, I've been close stance squatting forever. No, and I haven't been using them that much. They basically deconditioned.
It's a real thing. And that's one of the big reasons why we're such big fans of cycling volume, specifically starting low, specifically if you haven't done an exercise in a while. Like to James and I, one of the craziest things is like people put in a new exercise and they're like, start with 5 by 10. Like, yeah, like try that with lunges. If you haven't done lunges in 3 months, after 2 sets, your glutes will start to have benign fasciculations. Like they'll just contract by themselves. And then after 3 sets, you're going to start cramping physically when you try to descend. And after 4 sets, you're going to start cramping just laying down. And you'll have what some of our friends have genially termed IOMS, instant onset muscle soreness, where you're just like, oh, I'm sore, like right now, not like in 12 hours. And like, you know, because we know there's a relationship, a U-shaped curve between damage and hypertrophy. Don't kid yourself where on that curve you are if you have fucking IOMS. You just did way too much. And so it's good, better, much better to start doing 1 or 2 sets, especially get the ghetto MEV indicators. Like, do I have a massive pump? Yes. Are my muscles much weaker than when I started? Yes. Like, it's time to shut it down. What more am I going to do here? Another stupid food analogy. It's like going to the Cheesecake Factory if you've never been. And like halfway through your meal, you're like, I'm sick. I should stop eating. And then you're like, well, no, nonsense. You go to a restaurant, you eat all the food they put in front of you. Like, who the fuck said that? There's no rule that says that. You can take a to-go bag. And you can do that with your workout too. Just take your lunges to go. No, I'm just kidding. Just leave them and then come back next time and do 3 sets instead of 2. And sometimes people, James, you ever notice that clients, and just like even just you and I, like just as people who train, have this like weird thing of like we think there's some like third party watcher judging us and be like, what kind of person would I be if I only did 2 sets of lunges today? Like, that's not a real workout. And it's like, who is somebody watching?
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, am I pumped? Yes. Am I going to be sore? Yes, but you're so freaking done. Like, I've literally had clients be like, I only did 2 sets, but I feel like I can do more. I'm like, are you pumped? Like, dude, I can barely walk. I'm like, so when you say you feel like you can do more, what exactly do you mean? And then they're like, well, I just feel like it's really like wussified workout to write down that I only did 2 sets. I'm like, Who's reading your workouts other than me or you?
Yeah.
What are you
And it's
doing?
also, you should like, there's like, it's like a stigma with that, but really like if you got what you needed out of 2 sets, that means like you've been doing something right.
Winning.
You're winning. Yeah, exactly. Like whether it was what you did today or like the things that led you to today, which only required you to do 2 sets like that, all that collectively is like you've been on point with your training stuff. That's a good thing.
The other problem is much worse. You're like, I've done 8 sets of lunges and I don't feel anything. We're like,
Yeah,
Jake Hoffman skeptical eyes are like, it's by no means clear what it is you actually did.
I'm in that like meso 2 area where I'm up to doing like 6 to 7 sets per muscle group, and I'm just like, ugh, this workout's gonna be fucking awful.
You look at it the last week and you're like, this is going to be a lot of workout today.
And you're like, I hope I don't get a pump on this set. And you're like, nope, still getting pumped. Like, keep going. Like, God damn it. Set number 8, still pumped. Like, fuck.
All right, here we go.
Yeah.
Folks, that's it. That's all we have.
All right. That was a good one. Okay, so folks, Nick Shaw's book is out and about. Make sure you check that out. I had a chance to read it. It's really, really good. I think it's called Fit for Success, if I'm not mistaken.
Success.
It's on Amazon.
Nick Shaw is the founder and CEO of RP, and he's, been a lifetime athlete and really like he's coached a ton of people. He doesn't do that anymore because he runs the company, but he's also a wildly successful gazillionaire businessman. And he kind of is in this book sharing distilled thoughts of what he's come to a conclusion of. He's done a ton of reading and research for this book of like, if you don't even have to be in fitness, but a lot of people who listen to a webinar like this, you guys train your own clients, you have a fitness business with, even if it's just yourself, and you want to get as fit as possible yourself. And also you want the most business success. And Nick's book really just talks about the intersection of those two. And it just lays down like some basic principles of like, just do shit like this and you'll be successful. And I know it sounds lame. You're like, that's a stupid self-help book. The thing is, stupid self-help books fucking work. It's just most people don't apply the shit. So you buy his book, you apply the shit, and it's like, is it going to turn you into an overnight success? Fuck no. You got to have talent and persevere for that. But whatever talent you do have, if you persevere and do the right shit that he says in the book, don't do a ton of the wrong shit, you're going to do it real well for yourself. Because like, dude, I've seen so many people have reached out to me over the years, and I'm not even the expert. Nick is on the success bullshit. Okay, I'm trying to get my personal training thing going. I'm trying to be an online influencer. You're super popular. How did you do it? And like, I see the kind of shit they post and the kind of shit they do and don't do. And I'm like, you need to look up some like basic 7 habits of highly effective people. Like they'll do the shit where they're like, I'm really grinding. And then like half their posts on Insta is like stupid memes. And they're like, I'm really bored. What should I do, guys? Like, what the fuck? How the fuck are you bored? You should have an infinite laundry list of things to get you to the top of fitness. And it's just like, if you read this book, it's probably not going to be this huge revelation, but it's going to be like, God damn it, I know this shit. And it really gets you to do something about it. And if you want success, it's a fucking great thing to have in your back pocket.
Yeah, not to lick Nick's balls too much here, but one thing I enjoyed about the book is, despite all those things that Mike already said, I think a lot of people, one of the hurdles they'll always say is like, oh, I can't like change all these habits or behaviors because I got all this other bullshit going on. Well, read Nick's book and tell me about the bullshit going on in your life, because Nick had to deal with some pretty heavy stuff and he was very candid about it in the book. So I don't want to give any spoilers. Most of you might already know.
No, it's not a spoiler because it's on the cover. It's on the fucking Amazon description. I'll just tell it really quick. Nick's wife got cancer during COVID-19. Like, she's doing chemo and she like officially cannot get COVID-19 or will fucking die.
Yeah.
Like that shit is, and he has 2 children at home who they don't go to school anymore because people don't go to school anymore. And he's got to run this like mega company while dealing with all that shit. And it's like, oh fuck, I better know some shit about how to get shit done. Otherwise, like, like your life might be tough, but goddamn, I'm just fucking happy I'm not in that position. Like selfishly, like, holy fuck.
Yeah. So guys, check that book out. It's really good. I'm still working on mine. I got feedback from Jake. I'm still waiting on feedback from Ash, and I'm going to get some feedback from Chad sooner or later. Dr. Mike,
Chad.
anything in the work? Chad.
There's a street close to where we live in Vegas.
Electric Avenue.
Yes. That's like a weird, controversial political song, it turns out. I like to think of it as a disco song. I believe the street name, my wife and I were doing cardio, And we passed the street name and instantly thought of Chad because the street name, I believe, was called Royal Ascot Way. And I was like, whoa. We felt poor just walking by that street. And it was a street that's really a driveway that leads into a gated community. And it's not like a gated community where there's like digital gates that swing open. There's one of those little booths where there's a human being who lets you know if you can get in. And I was like, baby, call Chad. Wesley. It's like really
Man.
Royal Ascot wear.
Like as if an ascot wasn't highbrow enough. A royal ascot? Is a shit made of mithril or something?
I mean, seriously, like, can you imagine like telling people where you live? Like, hey, come through to the party. Here's the address. And then like next text you sent is like, you don't have to dress up. I know the street name is called that. It's just a name.
Yeah.
Don't feel too intimidated. Just tell the guy who you're coming in. He'll let you in. It's not as big of a deal as it sounds.
No, I'll just put you on a list. Don't worry about it. It's fine.
I'll put you on the list. You have to wear a tuxedo. When I say don't dress up, I mean like in a super custom tuxedo, but you got to rent one because we don't let people in without tuxedos.
All right. Any RP projects or fun projects in the works for you right now? For you?
More YouTube.
YouTube channel stuff,
More,
as always.
More everything, folks.
All right. I think Hypertrophy Book is closing in shortly, so keep tuned for announcements on that. And I think that's it for this week, folks. Thanks for engaging with us, and we'll talk to you next time.
Peace.